Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to be up here talking today about mobile devices, applications, things like that. I kind of put together this. Thanks, Keith. Put the presentation together kind of last minute, so there's a lot of temporary placeholder things in here.
Did you do it while sitting in the audience?
No, I did it last night at 3 a.m. after drinking. Half of it is drinking, half of it is hungover. You can tell which half is which. So who in here has a mobile device of any kind? Wow, pretty much everybody. What a shocker there. Who in the room thinks that their mobile device is pretty secure? You do? Okay. Oh, good. Sarcasm, yeah. Yeah, some of them are better than others, but in general, they're not all that secure. The reason why is kind of because, right, as these things have come out, it's primarily been consumerism that's driven them, right? So how many people stood in line for the iPad 2? I don't want to show hands, please, but just like if you drive around Best Buy, Billy, I think you were talking about it earlier, there were like lines and they were giving out tickets for the iPad. All right, well, one of the reasons that mobile devices have become so hot is because they're really cool to use and really cool to do stuff with. But now if you think about a corporate organization, they have to deal with this, right? Hey, I want to use my iPad to check my email, and I want to use my iPad to now get radiology images on it and work from pretty much anywhere, the hot tub, right? Why not? I'm a doctor, I can do what I want. So consumerism has really driven these things into the enterprise, and there's a lot of security concerns. Obviously, enterprises have that for a lot of reasons, and I'll hope to cover most of that. Who I am, why you should care. I'm not a coder. I just talk to people, I can read, and I've got security experience. Put all those things together, and that means that you can spend 2 or 3 months really like reading through stuff, talking to people, researching, and get a pretty good idea of the general state of security of things. I'm on the mobile security subgroup of HIMSS, which is a big healthcare group. I'm on the OWASP Mobile Security Project. I like to say that. Really, I'm just on the mailing list. It's all it takes on an open source project, right? Now you're a member. And so I don't pretend to know it all, but I know a good bit, and maybe I can educate some of you. Hopefully you can educate me. That's what I'm really looking for here. So give me your stories, additions, comments. Throw them out. Keep it kind of on topic. I know this group and other Atlanta security groups tend to get off topic, and so that's fine too. So agenda, talk about some email bad stuff, some general security issues when deploying mobile devices in an enterprise type environment, mistakes that developers commonly make. There's a lot of them, not limited to to mobile apps. And then what to look for when you're doing a risk assessment, and then kind of what's in the future, right? What do I see out on the horizon? Again, not that I know anything, but I've read some things that other people have said are out on the horizon, and I copied them. So email, right? Everybody wants to check email on their little mobile device so that they can take off at noon and go have a beer with lunch and not come back until not come back all day long. But a lot of times the way it's done is really, really bad, right? SMTP, POP, clear text on an unencrypted device, you're just begging for problems. Because now when you're transmitting your login password, that's over the air. Whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's a cell phone network, really neither of those is really private anymore. And you're storing anything you bring down on an unencrypted device. So if you lose it, you've essentially lost that data. Just a bad idea. I wanted to get this one out and make it its own category. Fight back against anybody who wants to do this. Don't punch them, but it's really a bad idea, and I see it all over the place. Some big companies who ought to know better. Security issues with deploying mobile devices. Mainly this is targeted at enterprise environments, so Ducky, pay attention. First thing to talk about is network security, right? Yeah, you control your network, you think. But when you go to a coffee shop, you don't control that network. You don't know who T-Mobile or AT&T or whoever it is has sitting in the back rooms, like looking at packets as they go through in clear text. You don't know what the guy right next to you at the coffee shop is doing. He could be me and running Wireshark or one of those tools to look at your packets, sniff your data, and try and break in. I recently lost my iTunes account. My Apple ID was compromised, right? I don't know how it happened, but I suspect it was probably a really badly coded app at a Wi-Fi hotspot. Oh well, change the password. PayPal reimbursed me all my money. I'm back up and ready to go. So that's the real risk, right? Is that somebody is going to sniff the network traffic, get that login and password, or if you're talking about like a mobile banking app, if you do it really badly, somebody could man in the middle it, present a fake certificate, and then do transactions as you. Hopefully you've limited the amount of transactions you can do. But there's all kinds of apps, particularly the ones that are industry specific, like especially medical apps. There's not a ton of security that goes into the development of those. So when you're putting this app out, this mobile device out, to your employees, to the folks who are going to use it, keep that in mind and make everything go back over a VPN tunnel at the very least. The PayPal app had a problem I read about where they weren't properly doing certificates, I believe. So essentially any certificate that you would present it, if it was an invalid certificate, the app just kind of defaulted to allow. That's not really good, right? And 68% of the apps have a problem with transmitting data in clear text. Even if it's just a session ID or a cookie, of course, everybody ought to know by now from web applications, you can take those and replay them, right? Just keep that in mind when you're deploying mobile apps. Local device storage. Anybody think it's a good idea to store any sensitive information on a mobile device? Good, you passed the test. Yeah, not good. As Scott can, I'm sure, tell you, anytime you put data on that SSD, the solid state drive on there, you really can't ever wipe it. So a lot of times, some of these apps will have like a wipe function or something that they think is going to then wipe it. But every time you read that data, according to Scott's presentation, from what I remember a few years ago from ShmooCon, every time you read the data, it actually puts it somewhere else on the device. So it's constantly moving this data around. All you have to do, if you lose that, if somebody loses that device, I go pick it up, just dump a forensics image of it, and I can probably pick up some data. And that was, Scott, your hot electron injection talk.
Yeah, that's not exactly what I said. So the forensics image is a lot harder than that. We're talking NAND, so we'll talk about that stuff later. I don't want to interrupt.
Okay.
But it's not quite
Thanks.
as easy as what you just described.
Well, no.
The data's there, you just may not have access to it.
Yeah. So don't do that. Anything that you're going to store on the device, you ought to encrypt it. You ought to make sure that your apps are encrypting it when you go to roll it out. Even if they say they're doing it securely, a lot of times they're not. Of course, good is email client. It has an encrypted container, essentially. So everything that it does should be encrypted in there. Speaking of good, another thing that you might want to consider is I set an alert for myself for, what, two something. And in the good app, one of the really weird things, I know it's hard to see back there, but it will actually tell you the meeting name and the call bridge in the alert that pops up, even when you're not logged into the app. I just found this out yesterday when I was playing around with it. So now, if I lose this device and somebody picks it up, it could be like, talk with the CEO and here's the call bridge, or discuss this really, I mean, probably not great security, right, to display that much information to somebody who's not logged into your system and to your app. So keep that in mind. I bring that up now not because it's related to this topic, but because the alarm went off that I set for myself. Connecting back into your network. If you are giving out these iPads or whatever, Android device, Windows-based device, how is it going to connect back into your network? I've seen a lot of times where people will just let it come back in through like some kind of a web account, or they might have it routed into their system. For example, ASN over the cellular network. It's like you can get a private ASN in, which is basically routing it directly to your corporate environment so that you bypass the T-Mobile network or the Vodafone network or AT&T network, whatever. That's not encrypted, right? I mean, it's encrypted the same way that all cell phone stuff is encrypted, but it's really not encrypted, right? So you can anytime it goes from the base station at the tower back to you, that's not encrypted at all. So you still want to use VPN. And then when you're on a Wi-Fi network, of course, it's not encrypted anyway. So that ASN, private ASN, doesn't necessarily do you any good in coffee shops and those kinds of things. And yeah, cell phone network, it's pretty much broken. There have been a lot of talks that are really interesting. This past year at DEF CON, if you went to, there was one day where they had like a 2 or 3 hour block where they said, don't use your cell phones if you care about privacy, because we're going to be cracking cell phone transmissions. So keep that in mind. This one has started to pop up a lot more frequently recently. Rogue apps, right? There are some rogue apps out there that might do some things like try and steal passwords. There was, I heard a report, I never looked into it too much, and I didn't see it confirmed anywhere, but on the Android App Store, there was some rogue online banking apps, right? So it might be posing as a bank. You download that app, put your information into it, think, oh, I'm going to check my balance or whatever you do. Yeah, your password just went off to the Vladdy in Romania, and now he's checking your balance for you, making sure that that stays just above 0. 10,000 apps per day in the Apple Store, I heard that somewhere. That's a lot. You can't really check all those. I mean, Apple, not even an Apple genius can check all those, right? Not in a day. There's also been live malware found. And I'm not the expert on mobile malware. I was thinking Don Jackson might be here. He's done a lot of research on that stuff, but it's like there's several different mobile malware kits that you can get out there. They're starting to become more common, kind of like the mobile web or the web malware kits, where you just kind of drag and drop, point and click. Here's your little malware thing, and it'll phone home. Of course, probably a lot of people remember the Icky or Ike virus that went around on the iPhones that would rickroll you. That was pretty cool. I actually had that as my background for a while because I just thought the background was cool. I didn't get actually hacked, so I say. How do you update these things? If you're in an enterprise environment, you want to make sure that the people are running compatible versions of the software and secure versions of the software. So do they have to plug in? Do they have to be tethered to a device? Can you push that out over the air? Some applications allow you to do that. Some mobile encrypted containers allow you to do that. There are different ways of doing it, but you need to consider that and varies. This was the part of the thing I put together last night.
And with enterprises, they're going to charge you for the data plan. You might have the data shared across all the devices, but if you're going to push out an app, it can cost you some.
You're right, and a lot of the corporate data plans they're metered, right? You pay by the kilobyte, pay by the megabyte.
Or they're averaged across the whole number of devices.
Sure, yeah.
And cell companies love that.
Yes. Ownership is a big one. It's a huge question. A lot of companies have started saying you got to provide your own device. Well, that poses a lot of problems. Sure, it cuts down on cost a little bit, but in the long run, does it really? Because now you have to have this special software that you put on there. You have to take up Ducky's time so we can plug you into the thing, get you set up. When something's broken, who does the employee call? Do they call IT support? Hey, I can't make a cell phone call with my phone. What do I care? Call T-Mobile, right? But that still would take time. If it's a high enough level executive, you'll get dragged into supporting that phone for them. You can't, as an organization, always have the latest and greatest mobile device out to everybody. Especially in medical environments, in hospitals, the doctors want the latest, coolest device. They want their own device configuration, right? Like there might be a doctor out there who's like, oh, Windows is the best platform, or no, Android is the best platform, or no, iOS is the best platform, or whatever your platform of choice is. The doctors are going to want their own thing because they're very picky. So you might end up having to support someone else's device for them. So the best thing you can do here is to publish standards that say, in order to be on our network, to use our apps, to do this or that, you have to meet this standard. That'll allow you to kick back a bunch of the devices that you look at and you're just like, there's no way you're putting that on my network. And device management. So you can remotely wipe some of these devices, a lot of them, depending on how you set it up. But if for example, the device dies, and you take it back to the Apple store and get your new thing just switched out. Now you can't remote wipe that, right? So if you're an organization and you've got sensitive data on there, you might have to disclose that to the government. That's never cool. Why are you disclosing this data? Well, because the iPhone died, and guy brought it back, and we couldn't wipe it. Sorry. So what do you do in that case? I mean, I guess you could buy the guy's phone from him, but that's not a good policy because then you're just doing upgrades. Every time the next iPhone or the next Android device comes out, you're basically subsidizing all your employees to go out and buy new devices. So that sucks. Enforcing security is a little bit different on mobile devices. None of this is as easy as it is on laptops or other kind of devices that you would have, like laptop, a desktop, a server. There's not just a push domain structure that you really have. They're not mature right now. And then again, you kind of have the issue of if it's going over the air, how do you protect that? If it has to be on Wi-Fi or if it has to be tethered, how do you push those things down? And then, again, who supports it? Kind of how do you disentangle the management from the carrier to the employee to the organization to the vendor to the user? There's tons of layers there on how you would manage that. Now I'll move into app mistakes not to make. There's a lot of them. Careful how you use and store data. Be careful how you use and store data. Don't store sensitive data if you can help it, right? That's the biggest mistake I think people make is they just assume that encryption will take care of something or that we'll wipe it later or whatever. If you don't have to store that data, don't store it. Hopefully your app won't be designed to cache things, but sometimes you can't help it. And when that happens, encrypt the data as much as you can. There was a Citibank app recently that was discovered, I think that was in October, November, that it stored the username and password in clear text. Bad, dumb mistake. Of course, hopefully they've got other mechanisms to protect the security of the account, but don't store username and password in clear text. Encrypt the communication and do it right. Like I said, if you're accepting any certificate as a valid certificate, you're defeating the whole purpose. It raises the bar about that much for the attacker to be able to get in. It really doesn't do anything to make it secure. And a lot of times, what will happen is that somebody will have a custom certificate. They're like, I don't want to pay whoever to get this cert. I'm going to make my own. And there's not really a mechanism to update that cert on the device except for update the app or whatever the issue is. Maybe you're leaving in debug code from when you were trying to just test it. And so it'll just accept any certificate. Don't do that. That's dumb. And again, even the cell phone network can be broken. So don't assume that it's a private line. There's this concept of a private line that goes back forever, back to modems and ISDN, and even fax is still considered to be a private line, so you can send unencrypted data across it. Well, hey, that's great, but what happens when your private line is a party line? You have problems. Same thing happened with Wi-Fi. People keep making the same mistakes over and over again. They don't learn, but maybe they ought to hire me. Take into consideration the platform-specific differences. Each platform does things differently. For example, backgrounding. When you background an app on the iPhone, it does a couple of things. One, it takes a screenshot of the app and stores that, right? So it can do the cool little go down effect and backup effect. And it also takes that app out of memory and puts it into some special area, and then you just have API calls to it. I don't know exactly how all that works. Again, I'm not a coder. On the Android, apparently, it does it differently. It just freezes the app, stores it in memory, and the app can't do anything while it's there. At least on the iPhone, right? It can kind of log you out or make you put in another credential when you come back in. On the Android, from what I understand, it just freezes it and holds it. And a lot of these functionalities, from what I understand, you can disable when you're coding an app. You can say, don't use this function, don't use that function. There's a keyboard caching function, apparently. Hey, that's cool. Now, if I'm a bad guy, I just hook that keyboard caching function, and I've got all your cached keystrokes. I don't know how far back that goes, but that's not a good thing. UI pasteboard, cutting and pasting, that's a fairly common thing. Probably shouldn't be cutting and pasting your password. I would doubt somebody would do that, but you might have some sensitive information in there. If you're an app developer, just don't allow that to be used. Don't allow that function to be used, and you should be okay there. Web services. When you're programming an application that talks over the internet to anything inside your organization or a cloud or wherever it is, it has to talk over the internet to a server on the back end, right? Most app developers that I've run across don't consider this as nearly as much as their application, right? They think security is in the device. Security is in the device. Now, who here has done any kind of web hacking where you put a proxy in line and then send bad data or some kind of other data across, right? Yeah, I know a lot of people in here have. Don't trust the client if you're a server. Don't trust the client. Even if there's a encrypted channel, you got SSL protection, that doesn't help, right? That doesn't help for that. So I've actually seen some applications which have SQL injection in them, right? It's just a structured query language type, whatever the XML feed, I forgot what that even stands for, but it's a structured way to look at it rather than the web interface, which is all nice and gooey. But you can still send bad data into this XML environment, and the app developers a lot of times don't count on it. Billy and I were talking, you know, when people test these things and bad data goes in, the guy on the server end says, your testing equipment is broken, make sure it follows these rules, right? They miss the whole point of, this is a potential security risk. You know, even if you can't get data out of that, you can still put junk data in. So now if I find some kind of a buffer overflow on your app, I can store something that every time somebody queries a certain thing, all of a sudden it overflows the app and I've got the data or whatever. I'm going to probably steal data out of your database just through your web service. People think that because it doesn't have the pretty friendly interface, it's not hackable like a web app, but it's essentially a web app and probably with less security because you don't have quite as many people beating on it and recognizing that it's a problem. So what you want to look for in a risk assessment, when you're doing a risk assessment, especially like in a corporate environment, your boss is saying, we really need to have some kind of a mobile platform out there so somebody can work from the hot tub or when they're on vacation or whatever it is. So here are some of the things to look at. First, function on the business. Focus on the business functions that this mobile device and mobile application would be doing, right? What type of data will you be accessing? What type of things will you be doing with it? If it's just to check email, you might be able to push back and say, no, it's probably not that good a thing. But if there's like millions of dollars attached to it, you're definitely going to have to do this, right? You're going to have to allow these mobile devices in your environment. But you can limit the types of things that you can do on those. So if there's a specific thing that's driving the millions of dollars, then you can exclude everything else from the mobile device, from having to support it on that device. So that's one of the things that we've seen is where people will come to us, and that's basically their scenario. CEO says he wants mobile devices in the hands of our, say our tellers or loan officers when they're having a big 4th of July thing and trying to go out and get new people signed up in the parking lot or whatever, right? Mobile app. Well, what are you going to use it for? And then take everything else off and protect the stuff that you have to leave on there pretty well. Keep in mind threats and vulnerabilities. I mean, a lot of these are fairly standard risk assessment type things, but think about them in the context of mobile devices. And compliance issues. I like compliance issues because you can sometimes just bring those up and your problems of bringing this new risky technology go away. Well, if we lose that device and we're doing this, we have to report to the Health and Human Services, and they're going to put it up on their website under the new high-tech provisions. Okay, we'll rethink this. Or, if we lose this is a lot of GLBA data. This is a lot of our bank customer information that can potentially be accessed. We're going to have to notify all those people that we've breached their data. It can make things go away fairly quickly. And what's next? What's out there on the horizon? Malicious code is becoming a much, much bigger thing. I think we're going to see the rise of mobile malicious code in probably 2011, late 2011, 2012, just my hunch. Probably a lot of malware, a lot more rogue apps. I don't know if you guys heard about this, the little square device that you can scan credit cards and goes into your iPhone, and then you can do credit card transactions. Well, it's a threat to Vertifor's business model. They're the ones who make the hard terminals and you swipe the card. So they wrote a malicious app that steals credit card information off of those little square devices. That's corporate ethics and responsibility. But hey, they had a great point, right? These things are not certified, not really certified, to take PCI data. They're not going to take your cardholder data. You know, if you look at the security that has to go into a PIN entry device, there's a whole program around it. Your iPhone does not pass that program, I guarantee you. It's got to be encrypted. It's got to have all kinds of other security precautions so that somebody can't stick an extra chip in there to read it. I mean, it's a pretty mature program. Square's devices are not built for that. So as you start to see these things getting more commercialized and more things added on to the mobile device, you'll start to see more malware coming out to take that information, right? As more banking apps come out, you'll see things that are trying to hook in and steal bank passwords. That's just what happens. Malicious ads is something we haven't seen yet that I know of, but if you think about it, a lot of these apps are ad supported. So what's to stop a programmer from sticking a malicious ad in there that maybe forces you to go to a certain web page and says, security has been compromised, you need to relog into your bank account from the web page instead of the web app. There's all kinds of possibilities with malicious ads, even buffer overflow in the application, jailbreaking the device. I know that there's been several jailbreaks for the iPhone that you just do over a web browser, which is pretty cool. It's good if you're trying to jailbreak. It's not good for security. Malicious functions in legitimate apps. I don't know that we've seen that yet, but it's perfectly reasonable to think that a bad guy might be able to penetrate one of these app developers' environment, stick some malicious code in there, or one of the coders who's outsourced in Belarus might put something in there to hook a banking password or something like that. Entirely possible. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think that's going to be an area of kind of hotness in the next few years. And so if you want to make a lot of money, get on this and start doing this, start testing for this. It's going to be the next web app kind of bandwagon. And Billy has done pretty well for himself on breaking web apps. More vulnerabilities, more cracks in the cell network, more application and platform vulnerabilities. I fully expect that it's going to be possible as people turn their attention more and more towards these mobile devices that they're going to be able to crack the OS layer from an app or from a web page or from these other places. Because as you do more and more commerce on your mobile device, there's going to be more and more incentive for the bad guys to do it. Again, it comes back to economics. You get that critical mass on one platform or on one place, and you have people who want to steal the information from there. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi drivers and software. I know that we saw this a while back, 4 or 5 years ago, where you could basically set up a malicious access point, and when people are searching for access points, you can pwn their driver, right, on the desktop or the laptop layer and get in at ring 0 access or to the root level, administrator level. I see no reason why you couldn't do that on mobile devices. And if you think about it, that's kind of the way it would spread would be the standard model of epidemiology, right? You got a guy in an airport whose mobile device is infected. He's walking through, just passing through 6 terminals, and everybody that comes in within earshot of his device is now getting infected by this thing. It's kind of cool to think about, I think, just because the way it would spread and the new things that would open up, new realizations that people would have about the security of mobile electronic technology. But it's still a potential issue. I mean, yeah, it would be a cool project if you have no ethics and scruples and want to do that. But it's certainly a risk, certainly an issue. Heard a story about an organization that found out they were being penetrated because there was somebody who brought their laptop into a server room. Don't ask me why, but apparently the servers had Bluetooth, and so they were using the keyboard functionality on the Bluetooth on the server to basically repurpose the laptop to do that. Right? I don't know that this is true, but it sounds cool and it's possible, I think. So Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, there's things that communicate. They're definitely embedded in this. I mean, the cell phone part of it, the chip part of it. So it's possible. You can do that. Be nice to see some people doing it at DEF CON or something. I think that would be a cool hack. But there is hope. This is not a hopeless cause. There's a lot more attention being paid to this. I think a lot of the larger organizations are getting on board with security on these types of projects quicker, right? They've learned from their mistakes of the past. They don't want to be targeted. You know, Microsoft doesn't want to be the giant target with a big bullseye painted on their face that they've been. So they're taking mobile security more seriously with their Windows Phone 7. From what I've heard, it's actually pretty decent. They've put a lot of the lessons they learned on their desktop apps and on their desktop operating systems into the Phone 7 operating system. It's not as good as it could be, but it's a tiny device, not a lot of processor, not a lot of RAM. So as those devices get better, you'll be able to do more things in security with them. OWASP, Mobile Application Security Project, I mentioned that already. If you're interested in that kind of thing, get on their mailing list. It's still beta or alpha, but you can help contribute to that. Veracode has a top 10 list that they published. I think a couple other folks have a top 10 or top X of things that tend to go wrong with coding mobile applications. So check that stuff out. There's a lot of people doing things in this space right now because it's really hot. So that's my talk. It was pretty short. I want to thank all these cool folks. And if you guys want to ask questions, that would be good. Yes.
So with everything you know, you're still carrying an iPhone.
Sure.
Why?
Because it's about risk, right? It comes down to the risk profile. I'm willing to tolerate a certain amount of risk. I don't have a ton of stuff on this. I mean, I use it kind of as a phone. I've gotten away from being a technophile. I'm almost, getting to be more and more illiterate on these things. So I have a mobile banking app, but just to test it. I don't use it for anything. I got to say, it's kind of crappy. The authentication it has I think it has to be a 6-digit numeric code. It's like, really? Have we gone backwards in time?
You can't brute force, 6, 0 to 9 numbers.
No, of course not. It does have a cool thing where you have to actually go to their website, and you have to go to their website and authorize and say, yes, I want to be able to allow a mobile application to see my balance. All I can do is see a balance and pay a bill, right? Billers that are already set up and that have bills due currently. So they've limited the risk there. It goes back to risk. It's a cool thing. I love whipping it out when I've got a song I want to know the name of, and just go to Shazam. It tells me what the song is. Or when I want to get a cool new restaurant, pop open Urban Spoon. Or when I want to calculate numbers higher than I can count on my fingers, there you go.
So it's not used for your enterprise at all?
We use email on it. Good. Like I said, it's an encrypted container, so it protects it pretty well. We did a pretty extensive vetting of that when we decided to go with good. That's the only thing corporate I can do on it.
How much risk do you see coming from mobile desktop applications?
How much risk do I see coming from mobile desktop applications? Remote desktop? Yeah, I mean, there's some potential risk there. Obviously, if you've got like Go to My PC or Log Me In or one of those other ones where you can, again, comes down at that point to the authentication. Is it just I've got the device, therefore I am a legitimate user? That's a bad security model. I think if you do it right and have some kind of a multi-factor authentication, whether it's an additional password that you would put in, whether it's setting it up specific to a unique ID on the phone, can potentially be a factor. And it comes down to what is the risk versus what it allows you to do. So now if your IT support guy can just log me in on his iPhone and start supporting people when he's doing something else, That's a business enabler. I would see that as not as much a business enabler as some people might initially think, because IT guys always carry around laptops anyways. You just pull that thing out, hop on a Wi-Fi hotspot, or get them a 3G card or something like that. Let them do it with the full desktop where you've got more control over that. So that would be my advice to enterprises on remote desktop applications on the mobile platforms. Still out there, it's still kind of cool. For just using inside my own house, I'd like to have one, but I don't want to pay for it, so I don't. Yeah, Billy.
What about things like Clear, right, where it's not just a mobile device that's going to use the mobile network for communication. It's let's actually connect our enterprise, our our actual laptops and computers to these things.
Yeah, I haven't tested Clear, but I know some of the other mobile networks are good at segmenting each individual device off, so you can't talk to other devices.
Okay, so it's like VLAN.
It's similar. It's similar. Now, I know of one that you can't do it over TCP, but you can do it over UDP. So you can ping people UDP all day long, and it shows up, and maybe some of the other protocols. So they're not perfect. I mean, I'd say don't trust your wireless provider, because who cares? They don't care. That is always VPN. That's right. Make sure it's a good VPN, not like PPTP. It's just pretty much almost clear text or easily reversible password. Don't do that. Anybody find any flaws in mobile applications or mobile devices?
The Good Technologies client for Android,
Uh-huh.
the one in the actual app store will allow me to copy and paste outside of the encrypted container.
Okay.
And I think they said it's going to be fixed in this March release. I got a beta client and they fixed it just in
Okay.
the beta client. So, and even with Good, which is sort of they got an iOS and an Android client. The client totally different code base, so you really do have to prove each release of the client. And as iOS and Android change, some of the functionality as Apple and Google change the APIs, some of the clients aren't keeping up.
Yep. So you're absolutely right about copying and pasting from inside the encrypted email container outside, because if you're still inside that encrypted email container, then you may have controls on the back end, for example, DLP at the email level, so that you can't send things out through the corporate email account. But if you can copy it and paste into any of the other email programs, then you can send it out, and you get around that corporate DLP and the corporate content control schemes. You're also right about each different version of the app on the different platform has different security. Each of the platforms has a different security model, and so you have to program for those. And so that's, for example, why we allow the use on iPhones, but not on Android. Also, there's 25 versions of Android out there?
Yeah.
Scott, did you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just waving my wand.
Just waving your magic wand? Are you being the fairy that's updating all of our mobile apps?
Yeah, well, my only other suggestion for you, if you really want to find some weaknesses, start looking at the stock apps. Start looking at Charles Schwab and TD Ameritrade and some of the other, because those actually tie backwards to all your bank accounts too. And there's some other issues for traditionally up until just recently, almost all of them still only had 6 characters with no symbols or anything, uppercase
Yep.
or other characters, and they would actually prevent you from doing this for passwords. And a lot of them were tied to social security numbers, so that was actually your login account name.
Yep, so stock trading apps,
Yeah,
something to look at.
I haven't heard of anybody reversing your stock trade if it was accidentally stolen. So, what happens if they transfer $200,000 out of your account? What's going to happen?
It's a great point. Yeah, because there's different kind of regulations. There's Security and Exchange Commission, SEC regulations around stock trading, but you're right. I don't think you can reverse those trades once they're made. So if I'm pumping and dumping a stock, or if I'm I'm going to sell this stock to this other guy that I don't know, right? I don't know how the stock market works exactly, but I would guess that there would be some pretty serious things that you could do to somebody's account. And on the back end, again, right, on the server level, hitting up those stock trading back ends can be potentially pretty dangerous. Anybody else with a question, comment, fun thing to say? No? Okay. Well, then, Billy, you can use my extra 18 minutes. I know you'll take full advantage of that. Thank you.